If you finished Chapter 3, you know this creature well. An actual, earnest attempt at the Roaring Night is one of the most ridiculous challenges that I have ever gone through in one of these games, and you, dear viewer, should both take that as the utmost respect and feel as if you are about to be thoroughly forewarned. This is an astoundingly punishing battle, mental or no, and while I find the story, physical rewards, and experience itself more than worth it, you will be having a bad time. So, for those who haven't attempted it yet, or tried and decided it would be best to move on to Chapter 4, God, I wish that had been me, here's a taste of my journey, so you might arm yourself with more knowledge for the future. While there are some things you can only claw your way through with bitter experience, I would hate for anyone else to struggle quite as much as I had. It took me 3 entire days to beat the night with the Shadow Mantle, adding approximately 10 extra hours onto my Steam data, which means that I've spent about 70 logged hours onto this game, and that's not counting Survey Program, Jesus Christ. And I've learned a lot about this abominable creature during that time. A bit of a disclaimer as we go forward. The way I play Deltarune is that I have an initial playthrough where I just go through the chapter as my whimsy takes me, and the second is the one where I hunt down each and every last secret that's possible of a pacifistic journey. I prefer to stick to choices that would make Chris the most comfortable, but, well, because of the nature of this game, unfortunately that's not always possible. Also, I find Curdly absurdly funny, so... Lastly, and most important for our purposes today, if I'm lacking a particular item I want or need in my second playthrough, I hack it into my game's inventory, but only if it's something I could have reasonably acquired, or it was an item I had in my inventory in the first playthrough. Par exemple, in the save I had prepared for Chapter 2 the night before the release, because I realized about 11 hours before the drop that, oh god, I don't have a Chapter 2 save. I had challenged myself to beat Spamton Neo on both his funny big shot glitch mode and simultaneously without the use of the spin cake or revival items. This will be important information for later. I really enjoy a challenging fight, especially in the Undertale Deltarune series, so even though these are definitely punishing, I just kind of think it's funny to go, how can I make this even more stupidly punishing for myself? I had assumed that the Chapter 3 secret boss would be of a similar caliber of challenge, and thus had superfluously eaten the confection in Castle Town before leaving for Chris and Susie's sleepover. Oh, Max. Needless to say, I hacked at that spin cake at about my second day in. I am not all that great with technology, so having to figure all that out before the Spamton save editor for Chapters 3 and 4 dropped was kind of a nightmare. I also really don't want to be one of those channels that have this veneer of pain being prestige, so here's your forewarning. I have several physical disabilities, one of which making it so I can't play video games the way that most people do. I have fucked up wrists. Sometimes I need to have the accessibility features on to be able to play something. I can't do most roguelikes without using an extension to connect my DualShock controller to the computer, and I need to take frequent breaks for the sake of my health. Ramb was right about a lot of things, but I think this line was especially meant for people embarking on this journey. Games are supposed to be fun. Don't let it feel like a job, alright? Region number 5 million, why Toby makes the best shopkeepers. You can pretty much do whatever you want at the start, but what I used to do before finding my most efficient method was having Chris hold their breath and Suzanne Ralsei both acting on their first turns. Ralsei was the one that I equipped with the Shadow Mantle, as I've found through bitter experience with Jevil and Spamton that if your healer goes down during the bosses, you're generally fucked. That's pretty much one of my only constants throughout this entire ordeal, though, as everything from the weapons to the armor to the inventory itself changed drastically over the next few days, so we'll go over all of that in more detail later. For turn order itself, the knight has 5, arguably 6 specific attacks, each that evolve over time. It always starts off with the shooting stars, which is an easy way to start gathering tension points since it's such a slow attack. Next is the first round of tracking knives, something I still somewhat struggle with, to be honest, and then what I'm going to call the dividing diamonds. I always recommend hugging the corners for each version of this attack, but the middle of the wall is a safe and easy way to start out. The wall of knives are a personal favorite. I don't know how most people go about surviving with this one, but my method is to blur my eyes just enough to be able to look at the entire screen so I can see what I need to dodge. I'd say that most people, though, should just look to the right, move the soul in accordance with what's about to happen, not what is happening. Following after is an even more fun attack for me, though, the slashes. They've got a similar mechanic to the tracking knives in that they start off with where the soul is, but the trade-off for covering the entire screen is that you have a bit more reaction time and wiggle room to get the hell out of the way. This one's also a good attack to farm tension with, so if you've got an easy pattern, you're even able to appreciate the lovely animation the knight's got going on. Arguably the last one is the knife carousel. I can't really think of a better name than this, mostly because 1, it reminds me of Jevil's carousel attack back in Chapter 1, and 2, I hate this attack with just as much fervor. I have no advice for this one beyond survive. The nice thing about these attacks is that they have a set order. Stars, tracking, diamonds, walls, or carousel, and then slashing before repeating itself. So once you've gotten that down, it's much easier to plan ahead. Let's talk revivements. Let's see here. Revivements. Oh, yeah, that's right. Use them. You can get them through the gachapon earlier in the chapter, and slight spoilers for Chapter 4. There's a way to infinitely gain them if you're fine with games of chance, so if you're like me, where you feel uncomfortable using a potion that you bought in a Pokemon game because, oh, what if I need it later? Then this is for you specifically. Don't be a hero. Don't be stingy. This is what you were saving those mints for. Use them. And on the subject, don't use any of them on Chris. This is because Chris is an evil bastard. They know what they did. No, it's because the night fight is the only one so far with a different knockout mechanic for all of the other secret bosses. Susie and Ralsei swoon, which hits them with a massive negative 999 hit points and leaves them as basically unrevivable for the rest of the fight if you're out of mints or dust. Unless you happen to hack in a revive right, but that's an unused item, so don't use it. Chris is the only one in the party that keeps the normal downed effect, which I suspect is for story reasons, but we're not going to get into that right now. So you can use food or Ralsei or a mixture of both to be able to get them back into the fray. These items are still going to be very precious to you for this very reason. Use them, but use them wisely. For some miscellaneous observations. Chris's soul will continue to keep the additional movement speed after you have them hold their breath, so don't waste a turn doing that for a second time. Susie is the character you should generally be worried about keeping alive, besides Ralsei, because as far as I've tested, the fight cannot continue unless she's actively a part of it. For this reason, while Ralsei should definitely still be the one that gets the mantle, if you're choosing to do a mantle fight, if you're doing a mantleless fight, good luck to you. Susie should be equipped with the best defensive items that you have. On the run, I finally beat this thing on. I had Chris holding the bounce blade, a Tenatai, and a Ginger Guard. Susie with the audio axe, Tenatai and Dealmaker, and Ralsei with the dainty scarf, Shadow Mantle, and Jevil's tail. You can get the Denatais from the Gachapon, and you can get the Ginger Guards from the vending machine. If you only have one Tenatai, I would prioritize giving it to Susie. However, I'd say it's better to take it off after Chapter 3, because it is an item that does affect your magic stats. However, you can and probably should keep it on Chris, because it doesn't seem like their magic stats really matter right now, but your mileage may vary. There are likely ways to optimize your party even further, but I don't enjoy completely min-maxing for a fight because I find that the difficulty is what makes things fun for me. Hence why I typically like to challenge myself by not using the cake on any of the secret bosses in these games. I'd recommend using the tension bow and the watch if you still have it as you're doing your first dozen or so attempts, and keeping them on if you're hurting for tension, but by this point, when you're consistently getting to the final attack, you should be confident enough in your night fight that you're either intentionally brushing past attacks or rarely getting hit during each round. There is one way to push this further, and I did it completely by accident. You see, Deltarune is one of those games that trains you to ignore your instincts and go off the beaten path if you want or like to comb through all the little details, which, if you've gotten to this point in the game, you probably do. So when you only see a single line about Susie losing her ability to spare and Ralsei seeming reluctant when he tries to convince the knight to stop, and the X'd out mercy bar in the knight's information, you would be completely reasonable to assume that you're supposed to tire the knight out to mercy it like you already do earlier in the game with King. This instinct is wrong. You cannot do this. You will die a bajillion times, and you'll start to question if this fight is supposed to be this hard when Gaster or whoever this is clearly communicates with you about how he's fascinated with your willingness to fight the knight and facilitating easier retries for this very reason. So surely you're doing something correct here, right? You're already seeing several of your friends post about how they finished this. It's been 2 whole days. You've replayed Chapter 3 5 times now, 2 of which purely dedicated to the butt route just so you can grab the mantle and the egg and the glow shard. So you have to be getting close soon, right? Maybe your equipment is still all wrong. Maybe you realize you only have half of your inventory filled because you forgot to stock it up again after thrashing Tenna. Maybe you don't have the cake or enough mints or maybe you're just not as good at this game as you thought. You've been spending 5 hours straight today just trying to beat this thing and you're telling me I've been doing it wrong the whole time? It is straight up impossible to beat it with mercy. Despite having attempts that would go past the legitimate 45-minute mark of waiting it out, you will die eventually. And as it is, I genuinely feel like there isn't enough information here to tell players not to attempt this, especially when this exact mechanic was used in not only the first chapter of this game, but it's also required in the pacifist ending for Undertale. I love everything about this fight and that it's actually possible to do, but if the intention is that showing mercy is mechanically supposed to be impossible to do, you have to be more direct about this. And I know that you know this because you made that information extremely clear for a different boss in Chapter 4. I don't know. I don't want anyone to think that I think that this game is terrible just because of this one mechanic, but I need you to understand. It was so upsetting to learn that I had been trying to beat it in this way that mechanically had been possible for pretty much every other fight, only to learn that, no, you're actually fine, you were just doing it fucking wrong. I don't know how to make this more clear in the game, maybe just have Ralsei say it outright after enough turns without using the attack or Rude Buster commands have passed, or a combination of the knight literally TPKing you after a certain amount of turns and then having Gaster say something along the lines of, "Perhaps mercy won't work in this situation." I don't think it's a bad fight. I really like it. As soon as I was done, I was sitting there like, I kinda wanna fight the knight again, that was fun. I was just in the, I think I'm bad at video games minds for literally 3 days straight because I was fundamentally misunderstanding something that, in my opinion, should have been made much more obvious. Please don't try to mercy the knight, you will suffer, and it will make you sad. You're a real gamer, I promise, you were literally just trying to do the impossible. Anyways, after you eventually figure it out, if your only option is to fight, then fight we will. It took a bit to get used to as someone who generally feels so averse to using this mechanic, but on my second attempt alone, I got to what I would later learn was the knight's final attack, so at least all of those hours learning how to dodge its stupid knives weren't wasted. Yes, I know they're probably swords, I just think the imagery of the knight throwing knives at you is funnier. Plus, it's good alliteration. Knight knives. Again, you might have a completely different style for me for this fight, because at this point I was starting to get pretty cocky and loopy, and actively chasing after danger to raise my tension just to finish this thing faster, but here's my general advice. You're best off by defaulting to using Susie's Rude Buster and having Chris and Ral defend to raise your tension. This consistently lets Susie buster every turn, or at least come close to it. Start out on the first round by having everyone defend. At this point, you shouldn't be or should rarely be getting hit by the simplified shooting star attacks, and then on round 2, have Chris hold their breath and Susie act. Unless Chris and Susie are downed, you don't really need to have Ral act at any time unless he is distributing healing. So just have him defend and occasionally attack if you're confident enough that you won't get hit that turn. I usually save this for the Wall of Knives and Slashes attacks respectively because I get hit the least out of all of them, but you do you. The second version of the shooting stars have these little rocket ships that are mechanically similar to the Mad Dummy fight in Undertale. Lead the rockets where you want them to go and then get the hell out of there. Dividing Diamonds is going to start having a bit of a gravitational pull that you have to fight against, but you're going to want to get used to that for the last fuck-off attack. And by this point, I would advise you to start getting comfortable with the Shooting Stars' fading mechanic, because there's going to be a bit later where you're going to need to take advantage of that. The tracking knives start having this one wheel constantly following you around. Try to stay on the edge of it as much as possible. We went over the carousel before, I hate that thing, but at this point, it's all down to consistency. I find that attempts are much easier to do on a controller as opposed to the keyboard, since the analog sticks let you do little micro adjustments to make it so that you're just a hair out of reach from getting hit, and with how much the knight's going to have thrown at you, you want to get every near miss you can get. This is especially important for the evolved version of the Slashes, since the knight's going to start doing a 360 fuck you I own this thing around the entire battle box past a certain point, which is personally my favorite mechanic out of this entire fight, because not only is it consistently the easiest way to fill up your tension bar, but it is also very, very fun to chase around if you're able to keep from getting hit. I prefer to have more healing items in my inventory over reviving items, but that's because by the end of my attempts I was rarely getting hit by the knight in general. I think I ended up only using one mint for my winning fight, and not even needing the spin cake, but again, your mileage may vary. Please use your items at your disposal. Rude Buster is easily the best and fastest attack, but you don't have enough tension for every turn, so you'll have to make do sometimes with regular hits. If you use the same or similar equipment as me, then Chris will have a lower attack than Ralsei, so the preferential order is going to be Buster, Susie normal hit, Ral hit, Chris hit. You'll know you're getting near the end when the night starts glowing, and you need to be at full health or as close to it as you possibly can if you want to have a hope of surviving their ultimate starburst attack. I'm going to be honest here. I have no clue how I lived through this thing on my winning attempts. I literally had 1 hit point left on Chris and Ralsei. My best guess is that you want to hug as close to the night as you possibly can when it's drawing the stars in, and be around the middle of the screen to take advantage of the stars spreading around and fading as the night spews them out at you. Try not to run into the slash it's going to do in the middle of the screen right at the end, because I have no idea if it legally counts as a hit or not, and it is literally the last attack it'll do if you can survive. So, I have the feeling if you end up dying to it, that you'd have the world's most understandable crash out. And after all that, well, it's all up to you, champ. It's going to be tough. God, it's going to be tough, but it was genuinely one of the most fun, rewarding, impactful, whatever adjective you want to shove into there. It was great. It was such a good boss fight, and there's nothing quite like the feeling of finally knowing you're at the end. Here was my winning attempt.
Fine. Oh. Oh. Oh, thank God. Okay. I was like, please tell me I was recording. Okay. 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 Oh. 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 Is that it? Please. Please tell me that's it. Oh. Oh. Holy shit. Oh. I think I'm crying a little bit. My wrist hurts so bad. Whoa! Oh. Oh no. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, uh-oh. Okay. Holy shit. Could you imagine if Ralph, you don't even know the half of it. I tried to do it without fighting. Well, I beat the night. My wrists hurt. And could you imagine if I went through all that and I forgot to pick this thing up? Well, I never have to do that again if I don't want to.
C'est tout. Good luck, Lightners. Have a nice day. And the glow shards and the gachapon. Remember to grab that thing before you save. Please, 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 please. I just didn't realize how completely I gave myself up to this game. Which is surprising considering the entire Penumbra Phantasm of the situation, but shh.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
When the maxi is so weepy and his fears feel so airtight, and rainstorms keep him up at night, when his bones decide to party and his nerves are set alight, the bed is bound to be contrite. Looks like 5 Nights at Freddy's till next life.
I go and fight the boss characters for fun, so I'm used to the...
How?
I just like them.
Because he's a pro gamer!